Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone who is attending our 5th webinar. You know, I can't believe that we've now done this 5 times since January, and I think this one's going to be really one of our best. I am so pleased and thankful that Amy Tan is able to join us tonight and take time away from her very busy schedule. And also Ken Kamler and Kim Frank. Thank you so much for being part of our webinar. The Explorers Club welcomes everybody. And I thank David Dolan, who's our Vice Chair of Programs. And for those out there who don't know me, I'm the new chapter chair of the San Diego chapter of the Explorers Club. Tonight, we will not be using the chat. However, we do have the Q&A, and I really encourage everyone out there who have a question for Amy, Ken, Kim, or David to use the Q&A at any point. And before we wrap things up this evening, David Dolan and myself will, make sure we go through those questions. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to David, who will make some of our initial introductions.
Well, thank you, Char, and thank you, Char, for all the logistics. She does the magic behind the scenes, kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the screen, but actually it's real magic to make sure all the logistics happen and the Zoom stuff happens. I'm a Luddite, so I do not understand these things, but she does, having worked for IBM and every other organization of that sort. Anyway, I also like to extend a special welcome to the Southern California chapter of the Explorers Club. I've been currently serving as the interim co-chair of that chapter in a time when we're reorganizing, and we will soon be having new elections of officers for that. And also extend a special welcome to the Northern California chapter, Lester Ewing, who is the chapter chair, and none other than my brother Tom Dolan happens to be the vice chair of that. Tom is actually in Texas with my other brother Donald chasing tornadoes, but that's another story for another time. In any event, Amy Tan is from San Francisco and the Bay Area and lives in Sausalito, so it's very appropriate to give a special welcome to our friends from Northern California to join us. Now, tonight is indeed a special evening that I have actually been working on since the beginning of January, when I knew about the premiere of the documentary Amy Tan, a Unexpected Memoir, at the Sundance Film Festival, later to be premiered this last week on PBS. This movie was special to me, not just because and most significantly because of Amy Tan, but also because of its director, Jamie Redford. James Redford, with his father, Robert Redford, co-founded the Redford Center that's based in San Francisco, that is this incredible incubator of documentary films that they provide funding, support, advice, insights to primarily younger documentarians to develop films that raise our awareness of issues of environmental justice, racism, things that ranging from dyslexia, but also things related close to home to Jamie's and my life, the issue of organ transplantation. I got initially connected with Jamie not long after my own double lung transplant in 2017. The following year, Jamie and I began a conversation in which he was providing advice to me as I dealt with my post-transplant experience. I told him, well, the hospital wants me to be the poster boy for transplantation. And he replied to me, well, he was still in the hospital recovering from his surgery when they asked him to be the poster boy. So, of course, when you're the son of a famous actor and so forth, that happens. But, all of us who've been through these experiences, sometimes we get approached too soon, too quickly, and to have a moderating voice to give counsel is helpful. And he gave me other advice, likewise, they're helpful. So when I found out that he directed this film, I thought it was very important that we reach out to Amy, see if we could organize the manner in which we could honor Jamie's work and his life by promoting the film and then discussing it in a session like tonight. So after months of conversation, Amy and I were here. Thank you. And likewise, perfectly, we have Ken Kamler and Kim Frank join us. Now, let me just introduce my fellow panelists. Kim Frank, you might not know this, Amy, but Kim and I are both graduates of the Book Passage Travelers Writers Summer Workshop, which she could walk maybe 15 minutes from our home to Book Passage in Corte Madera. This is a legendary work, and they have writers like Don George and Tim Cahill there, and Kim and I attended the same one, and it's just a wonderful way of learning about the whole area of writing, particularly travel writing. Now, when you get to writing, you come across somebody like Kim Frank, and you find out here's a natural. I'm not sure why she was even attending a seminar, because she's already done it all. But all of us still have things to learn. Kim has been a writer, editor, crafting stories that highlight issues such as conservation, exploration, and adventure around the globe. One of the books, oh gosh, I'm going to just show this to you. Can you see this? This is we have a special coffee table just dedicated to that book. It's Born to Ice with Paul Nicklin. It's huge magnum opus with a intro by Leonardo DiCaprio. But she's been in so many other books and pieces through the years that I don't have time to go through all that. But she lives with her family, beautiful 2 daughters adopted from China in Sun Valley, Idaho, along with David Buchanan, a very dear friend of all of us. And now, joining us tonight also is Ken Kamler. Ken is one of these really unusual persons that is kind of behind the scenes. But the fact of the matter, he's been at the forefront, even though we may not know. He's not somebody who toots his own horns, but he gets the job done. 25 years ago today, he was on Mount Everest as the highest physician when the worst disaster up to that point happened. All of us know about it. It was all documented by Krakauer and others. And it was Ken Kamler's unique skill as a microsurgeon, particularly working on hands, that really made the difference in people's lives up there. But that's not the only thing he's done besides those 6 trips on Everest he's done, and working with National Geographic and working with NASA and so many other organizations. He was also part of the team, which actually was led by David Buchanan, that found the Apollo 11 rocket engines on the surface of the ocean. And that's a whole nother story. That was others part of that trip include Jeff Bezos, and the team received the club's citation of merit for that unique feat of exploration, and it was unique indeed. Ken Kamler also had a campsite named after him at the 2005 Boy Scout Jamboree. I could go on and on, but we don't have time for that, but I'll do a little bit more show and tell. Ken has been doctor on Everest and surviving the extremes. And I understand he's working on another book now, and maybe a revision of one of these. So we look forward to those. But Ken, I'm so glad you could join us today. And every time I see you, we have a chance to catch up. You've been so encouraging me. I've had this group of physicians with the Explorers Club who behind the scenes talk to me on the phone and give me medical advice. As a transplant recipient, I have special needs, and they make sure that they kick me in the butt when I need it. Now, I think at this point, I'd like to transition to showing the trailer for the documentary, if that's okay, Char. And then Amy, we'll have Ken Kamler introduce you, and then the show's yours. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah. David, let me just share my screen.
Okay.
to do this. Is this working for everybody?
The Joy Luck Club went right to #1 on the bestseller list.
The Joy Luck Club was so massive when it came out. Everybody loved it.
It had such a huge impact on paving the way for other writers of color.
My childhood, with its topsy-turvy emotions, has in fact been a reason to write.
Auntie Daisy and Uncle John were two of the founding members of the Joy Luck Club. It was hard to wrap my head around all the different aspects of Auntie Daisy's past. What helped is knowing the story of my grandmother being a concubine.
I didn't understand until I was an adult what she meant by sacrifices. We had many, many arguments. And I came home one day and she was raging and she pushed me and her eyes were glazed in a way they were gone. She was not a tiger mom. She was a suicidal mother. I think it was just an urge she would never be able to get rid of.
There you are, puffing away.
It was part of my decision to not be like her at all.
Amy really started writing as a mental health break from all of the business work that she was doing.
I started to ask her about her life. I would listen to everything. She loved the idea she was helping me to write.
Oh, yeah. Who are the characters in Amy's work? Her family and people who really have gone through hell and somehow have come out of it.
I am not the subject matter of mothers and daughters in Chinese culture. I am a writer compelled by a subconscious neediness to know, which is a perpetual state of uncertainty and a tether to the past.
All right, David, back to you.
And let's, I'm going to swing to Ken Kamler to do the introduction for Amy, please.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm delighted to introduce my longtime dear friend, Amy Tan. Amy is a phenomenally successful author. Her first book, The Joy Luck Club, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 40 weeks and was turned into a groundbreaking movie that we're talking about tonight. She's had a string of bestsellers since then, and she's received almost every literary honor there is. But most, if not all of you, know that already. So now I'm going to reveal some things about Amy that only her friends know. When Amy invites you to her home, she wants to hear about your accomplishments, not talk about hers. Most of the time, I don't even know why she's in town until I read in the papers a day or two later that she's just done a TV special or accepted another prestigious award. Amy remembers all the details of what you tell her. And the next time you see her, she asks for updates. Amy has many, many friends because her genuine concern makes each of us feel like we're her special friend. Something else about Amy, and this you can guess from her writing, is her sensitivity to other people. One example that's precious to me began when I remarked over dinner in a restaurant that my 93-year-old mother couldn't get around much, but she could read, and Amy was her favorite author. Amy had planned to take the subway home after dinner, but when she found out my mother lived only a mile away, she insisted on walking that mile to pay her a surprise and for my mother an unforgettable visit. And one more thing that this audience in particular will appreciate is that Amy's sensitivity keen powers of observation, and adventurous spirit make her a natural explorer. We've traveled together to Indonesia to look for the bipedal octopus, and to Bhutan, where Amy acted as a scribe while we made rounds at a trauma hospital, treating victims of auto accidents and bear bites. Later, the Queen of Bhutan even requested an audience with her. And we've been to Easter Island to study recently uncovered moai and map lava tube caves on an Explorers Club flag expedition. So, Amy, we're honored to have you with us tonight. Welcome to the California chapters of the Explorers Club.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
Boy, after that, let me just start by saying a little bit about how this documentary got started. And I will say, this is Jamie Redford's movie. I happen to be the subject. I did not make it. It started with our looking at doing a little segment on play. He was doing a film on play, Playing for Keeps, about adults, the importance of play for adults. And he wanted to film the Rock Bottom Remainders, a band that I'm with. And he, as we talked on my veranda just behind here among the oak trees, we naturally ended up talking about the reasons why we need play. And we talked about trauma, we talked about pain and resilience. And those subjects led him to feel that there was more beyond play that he wanted to use for a film. He and Karen Pritzker, who is his partner with KPJR Films, both thought that they would want to do a documentary on me for American Masters. Now, when I heard about this, I was absolutely against it because I was on what I called my path to obscurity, this deliberate path where I was going to regain my privacy because I had never really wanted to be in the public eye. I was going to be a writer, but all of what happened, this kind of success, took me by surprise. And I wanted to retreat into a time when I didn't have as many expectations on me. So what Jamie was proposing ran counter to that. I also told him that I didn't think that I was famous enough for American Masters. And, he had an argument about that as well. Jamie actually didn't argue. He was such a charming, kind individual. And what he would do is come over with sandwiches and we would simply talk. He said he would do a little sample of the film he had in mind, which would include animation. And that if I didn't like what he showed me, this 5 to 10 minute segment, I could say so, and he would simply go away. During that time, when he was putting together this segment, I learned something more about Jamie. We had actually met about 20 years prior through mutual friends and saw each other occasionally over the years. He'd come to parties at our house and things, but we had never had these deep conversations. And after a while, I said, I met you initially when you did that film on transplants, The Kindness of Strangers. And he didn't remember meeting me, but I told him I very much remembered the film. And I asked him about his condition. And it turned out he thought he was pretty soon going to need another liver transplant. I asked him if he was having any issues. Was he in pain? And he said, he said, yes. And I said, how much? And he said, pretty constant. I said, what level? 1 to 10? He said 10. And I thought, wow, this is a guy, he's dealing with pain. This is a kind of trauma that he has to deal with all the time. Eventually, with Jamie's, he never used that, by the way, as a tool to get me to do this. But I did think to myself, I want my privacy, and I'll get it one day. But what's my privacy compared to Jamie wanting to make this documentary about pain, trauma, and resilience based on my life, and that this was going to be very meaningful to him. And in fact, during this period when he was courting me, this is the term his wife used, courting me for this film, he was telling a number of his close friends what this meant to him and why he wanted to do it. I didn't know any of this, but when I finally said that I would do it, I said, you know, you don't need any more uncertainty in your life, so go ahead. I give you full reign, no hesitation. I trust you, whatever you want to do. It's your story, meaning you create the narrative based on me, the material. And he didn't need to have, you know, come to me for permission to do any of it. My role then was to talk to him, for him to film, to show him whatever archives I had from my life, including photos, but also documents and things that I had collected over the years. Now, you have to understand that I trusted him implicitly, because here's a guy who could go through all of this stuff and choose some fairly, you know, salacious things, or he could have been filming my underwear drawer for all I know. I just said, you know, go ahead and do it. But I knew he would have a great deal of sensitivity in doing this. There was one moment during his gathering of information, of interviews, when he said to me, I've decided that the focus I want to do, and this is what you need to have when you do a narrative, you create a narrative, you have to have something as the fulcrum that this balances on. He said, I would like to use your mother, and especially her trauma and her suicidal impulses. And I thought, how right he is, how perceptive, because if I were to look at anything in my life, you know, some people might choose the Chinese American immigrant experience. They might look at the beginnings of me as a writer. But I would say that the thing that was most formative in me, that does in fact influence how and why I became a writer, would be my mother and her self-destructive tendencies. This was, in a way, you know, what you see in Joy Luck Club is very much similar to the kinds of things that went on in relationship between my mother and me. But what you were seeing there is what I would call Daisy 10 light, L-I-T-E. And the real truth of what was going on there was a lot darker. There were suicide threats, often, sometimes every day, sometimes, you know, once a week. On good times, you know, a month would go by. And there were also suicidal attempts. And those were enough to keep us in line to believe that the threats could possibly lead into something else. So that was a formative part of my life. And Jamie saw that, and he used that as a focus. You know, I didn't really see this movie until it was nearly done. He sent me a rough cut. And he had in his email, he said, I didn't want to send it to you yet. He wanted it to be more polished, but he said, it's necessary to send it now. I thought that was because he had to submit this to film festivals and that he needed my approval to go ahead with that. He sent it to me. I watched it with my husband, Lou, and I got back to him that same day. And I gave him not just my approval, but my gratitude, my tearful gratitude for what he had put together, the sensitivity, the choices he had made. You know, I was in tears watching this. I said that the way he put it together also showed why I became a writer. I didn't hear back from Jamie after I wrote this email, which was very unusual when we wrote to each other. If he didn't hear back from me after a day, he said he'd get worried. His radar would go up. Well, I didn't hear back from Jamie that day or the next day or the next day. And I sent him a letter that said, I'm getting worried. And I finally contacted his wife, Kyle, and she said, your instincts are right. Jamie is dying right now. And she thought it would be surprising if he lived out, more than that day. And in fact, he did die about an hour and a half after I reached her. This was a huge shock, not just to me and to his team, to his partner. It was a shock to all of us because Jamie was so vital, so full of life. I found out later that this film was his reason to get up in the morning, that he was in incredible pain and terribly ill. That all of the things that this film meant to him came out after he died, that he had listened daily to all my audio tapes, and that the family joke that when they got into his car, it was Amy Tan time. That's all, the audiobooks, he would listen and talk about it. Every day he would go back after the interviews and tell his friends or his family, what he had gotten out of this. I never knew any of this. And of course, it made me weep to hear this. And I felt I should have given him more and more and more. Although I really don't know what else I could have done. If he had asked for it, I think I would have given it to him. So that is to say, this film is deeply meaningful to me on several levels. First, that it is something that is a document of my life told in a particular way. It is also a documentary about my mother, and I think she would have been extremely pleased by what he showed. I think people really loved my mother, and in spite of all her flaws, that they loved seeing her. And it is also a gift to me from a dear friend, a parting gift. And watching this film at the film festivals and on PBS American Masters has been, I won't say it's bittersweet, because it is with the longing that he was there to watch it with us and for us to be able to talk about the choices. At the same time, I do think that he has been there for all of it and is excited for how it's been received by so many people. So that's basically what I wanted to say. And I will turn it over then to Kim or whoever wants to ask questions.
Well, that is so moving that it's hard to even speak after it, to be honest. It is a beautiful film, and if we only speak for a moment, I mean, Amy, I've been a fan of your work since, I saw you in 1996 at the Sun Valley Writers Conference. So I've been inspired by your work for a very long time, both as a writer and now as a mother, and as a daughter, and also, of course, as a mother of adopted Chinese children, which came later into my appreciation of your work. And when I saw the film, my initial moving into the film was excited to experience more and learn more about you and your work and all the inspiring kind of nuggets that you share in the film about writing, especially, and craft. But the film itself is so beautifully put together, and the transitions are so amazing, and the animation. If anyone that's watching hasn't seen the film, it is absolutely a must-see for the artistic quality of the documentary, if nothing else. The sensitivity around some of the topics, the way that the animation was used to kind of show the feelings, really was impressive. The whole thing was beautifully done. So I'm appreciative to be here right now and be able to engage in a conversation about it. And
Well,
do I have a question?
I thought the movie was, I very much anticipated it when I heard it was being made. And I'm very familiar with Jamie's work. I support the Redford Center financially, and I'm on a weekly email list, which, by the way, if you sign up for the Redford Center email list, every Friday night they send a link to a movie and with passwords to watch a very exclusive opportunity to watch a documentary, many of which are hard to come by. But I've followed his work for some time. And all of us, of course, are very familiar with his father's work, life of work. But Jamie, in his own right, has had a career that's been exceptional. I first learned about him by reading a biography on Robert Redford, in which he told the story of Jamie's struggle with liver disease and needing a transplant. At a time, Robert Redford was filming, what is that show? The game show? That's not the name. I'm blanking.
The quiz show.
Quiz show, thank you.
Quiz.
But every weekend he's going back to the hospital, and it's just kind of a nail-biting time. So I did not really know about his life at the time, but I knew about what he's going through. So that stuck back in my mind when I was going through my own transplant situation. And then, but I really appreciate the writing, which the work he did with Tony Hillerman's work and bringing those to screen on PBS, the various Navajo detective series. But he's an exceptional writer himself, and he's done all these documentaries of everything from dyslexia, which that came out of his own experience with his son, which, by the way, Dylan has now assumed his role as co-chairmanship of the board of the Redford Center. Anyway, he's a very talented person, and this is a very fitting tribute for his last contribution. But I think his contributions go way beyond, because there are so many documentaries that have been made, that are being made, and will be made because of the support of the Redford Center. And I believe it's probably redfordcenter.org, but everybody listening, please check him out, because he would want you to do so. Ken, your introduction was really amazing in terms of learning about all of Amy's very adventures and so forth. I guess I saw a note from Mark Marfit, who asked if Amy's going to be talking about all of her adventures and explorations tonight.
Yeah, but I just named a few. We could do a whole show just on all the explorations Amy's done. She's so modest, you never know these things about her. So I thought I would just let you in on a few of them.
Well, there's a great tradition in exploration of not only those who are leading expeditions and who tend to get the notoriety. It's people behind the scenes taking photographs, writing, and creating art, sometimes painting. And they're not quite as well known, but they're getting better known now, because those of us who really understand how these things work really do appreciate everyone's contribution, not just the so-called leader.
Mm-hmm.
There's a terrific part in the film, Amy, that I loved when you talk about risk. And I think that it is very applicable for this group in particular. But the idea that, and actually I wrote it down, the quote of it, so maybe I'll quick read it. You said in the film, to have fun, you have to take risks beyond what you are comfortable with. You can't just imagine the dangers and what could happen as a consequence at the end of it. You have to just be there and have a great time. And with many risky things, the potential of having fun is so much greater. You find yourself there. You just have to go to the extreme.
Yeah. I mean, one example, I think they showed a very brief photo of me swimming with a whale shark.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I used to be terrified of whale sharks. I mean, Ken, you might have remembered I when we're going to Easter Island, I was a little nervous about going to Shark Island, and there was a passage where there's supposed to be these shark attacks. Well, there were not only no sharks, there were hardly any fish. And later on, I thought, well, I just have to understand what this fear is based on. And I ended up going to Raja Ampat. Ken was there. We were there, and I remember that they had told us that in the lagoon it was a nursery for white-tip sharks, and this is a group of friends that we had, and many of them Explorers Club people, where when you saw, somebody would see a shark and they'd say, "Hey, there's a shark," and instead of people getting freaked out, they'd all say, "Where?" And then they'd say there, and they'd all swim over to go find the shark. So being with a number of, with Explorers Club people really fosters in you a curiosity and an abandonment of caution. There's actually no need to be cautious about white-tip sharks or whale sharks, which is another shark that I have swum with. The last time I went there, Ken, to Raja Ampat, to Misol, there were so many sharks that the first time we'd be really lucky if we saw, 2 sharks. This time they were always there. They were right there. And in the afternoon, I could swim with about 25 of them. And then the great thing was they weren't scared of people anymore. So I could just be quiet there, and they'd be circling me, staring at me like, "Why are you here?" I do have to say that, one of the things that you have to understand where documentaries could possibly go, and we could not go into this area of my fascination with the natural world. And that was that would be a detour from the main thrust of this. But I would say that what it possibly is based on, my pursuit of danger, is that feeling that things were out of control, be it with my mother and her suicidal threats, or the loss of my father and brother of brain tumors in the same year, and my mother's saying that there was a curse and we would die as well. It brought to mind this sense that if you don't look at these things that you are afraid of, they will continue to chase you. And at least if you turn around, you would see what it is, and then you would deal with it that way. And that so many of these fears that I had just disappeared when I looked at them rather than running away from them. Definitely being in the ocean was a major one for me that opened up a huge new world of adventure, but knowledge, curiosity. I said that it was fun, but it really has to do with wonderment. Wonderment is fun. When I look out my window here at the patio, I have all these birds, and I'm just noting them, their behavior. I'm not a birder where I need to find different species. My thing is to follow the behavior of birds through the season. It's nesting season now, so I'm looking at that. And that's all the kinds of things that people in the Explorers Club do. They find something new and they follow it, and they make these discoveries, and that's what's so exciting and worthwhile, to the world. I was just writing, I think Bernd Heinrich was honored by the club, wasn't he? Hasn't he spoken at Bernd Heinrich, the naturalist ornithologist who wrote The Mind of the Raven?
It sounds familiar.
Anyway,
yes.
Yeah, I think he has presented at the Explorers Club. But he and I were just writing back and forth today about birds in our yards, birds in his camp, his 640-acre camp in Maine, and mine in my little patio right here. But that is also a huge part of my life, and it ties back to what you were saying about danger, which I don't think of as danger anymore, and just being with explorers. I mean, it's one of the great joys of my life these days. I don't know whether Mark Moffat is here in the audience, but he's taken me on a number of adventures to find things, including poisonous snakes, and venomous snakes, sorry. A number of people will, these things that I used to run away from. And I hear about an opportunity and I run toward it, now, because it's just fascinating.
I do see Mark Moffat as one of the attendees. So shout out to Mark, and glad you could be
Well,
with
maybe
us.
he'll ask a question. He'll ask,
I want to just
yeah.
say one of the reasons I wanted to invite you, Amy, to be part of this is you're known to be a not just a best-selling author, but a exceptional author. Of course, Ken and Kim are both published authors. I am in the process of writing my memoirs, but it's morphing to other things. The way I do things, I like to look at examples. So I'm reading your books, but I also signed up for your master class, and hopefully that will be a more disciplined approach. But I want to also tell you that one of the books that has most influenced me on my writing is a book called On Writing by your fellow Rock Bottom Remainder band members, Stephen King. And I remember Ken Kamler and I were on a bike trip, kind of a day trip with Alan Nichols and others. We're on the ferry back from riding across the Golden Gate Bridge. And we're sitting together on the ferry from Sausalito back to San Francisco. Ken's there, and this guy named Lou. And I'm gushing about this book I'm reading. It's called On Writing. It's by Stephen King. It has everything I ever needed to know about writing. And I'm going on. I was almost like embarrassing myself. And Lou simply says, "Oh yeah, that was dedicated to my wife." You, Amy. So, oh yeah, I thought I remembered that. Try not to miss that detail, but it's an exceptional book. But I guess what I want us to do is, as explorers, to learn from those craftspersons who can create a narrative about our stories, our adventures, our explorations. Kim and I were even talking today about maybe we should start an Explorers Club Writers Guild where we can kind of help out one another, critique each other's work, just as we did at that book passing seminar. Anyway, I want to just thank you for being an example for us, Amy. And if you'd like to give us any advice on how to write, we're very eager. I got my note paper. I'm taking notes.
That's a 4-hour answer found in my master class. I'm so glad now. I'm so glad I have that out there now, so I could, sometimes I answer these questions about writing and I'm not feeling particularly coherent. So now, I have the master class nicely edited, so I sound like I know exactly what I'm talking about.
So I have a question, really. Mark raised his hand, and I'm wondering if you would all be okay if I let him come on and talk.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
All right, Mark, you have to unmute yourself.
Unmute, here I am.
And put your video on.
And Mark, we should say,
I'm on the East Coast, so you don't want to see me here. I'm in the loungy position.
Yeah, but
we explorers do that once in a while. But yeah, I'm Amy. What is you have a fascination not just with birds, but with creatures generally, and I'm wondering. I've never asked you how far back that goes. Did you think you'd love snakes as a child?
Yes.
And are there still things that you want to look for?
Yeah. When I think it started when I was about 8. I'm somebody who grew up in, among concrete sidewalks mostly. But when I was 8, we moved to Santa Rosa, and our house was fairly close to a creek. And I could go down there, and also open fields and little places where you could do a rope swing off and kill yourself. But during that period, I started playing in the creek and finding creatures like tadpoles, as well as snakes. I had a thing about catching snakes, not just in the creek, but wherever we went that had a lake. I thought that was great fun, especially because people were scared of snakes. I lost a snake once in the car right before my parents were going to pick up my great aunt and great uncle. And we were a little nervous about that one, because they were old and they could, it could be we could get in a lot of trouble if the snake came out. So for a number of years, up until I was maybe in my 20s, I used to catch snakes until I realized that's not a good thing to do. You shouldn't take a wild creature out of its habitat. We did return these creatures to a similar habitat, but still, that's not good. I love tarantulas, for example. I would catch tarantulas and, let them crawl up my hand, and then I would take them home. I don't know why I wasn't more afraid of those creatures. I think I didn't have a chance to be afraid because wonderment was the first thing I felt about those creatures that I saw. And as you know, I'm just fascinated with any behavior of animals, including ants. Mark gave me an ant farm one year, and I spent about 3 weeks just staring at these girls, going there, and I found out they're all females and doing their thing and looking at their personalities and mourning as they died one by one. I could spend hours, instead of going off and lying on a beach, I could spend hours just watching ants come out of a crack in the sidewalk and seeing which food sources they prefer, whether it would be, we did this on Easter Island, as you recall, Mark.
Oh, yes.
Before we went to do your experiment. And that was your research. And that was I put out goji berries, breakfast cake, and egg white to see which source of food the ants would prefer. And to make it especially challenging, I took Tiger Balm and created little pathways. So they would have to go through a puzzle, a maze to get there, and found out really interesting things about that and how these paths were then easily followed by the other ants. My trip to Easter Island, I think, is what would have qualified me for Explorers Club membership, because I was with Mark Moffat doing original research as his assistant, carrying, a little test tube or something. But it was to find out whether the ants on one side of the island were part of the same colony. And in fact, they were. So now, my day, when I'm not writing, I often look outside the window and I document behavior. I sketch the behavior that I'm seeing. And over time, I have journal books and I just draw these. And later on, I might draw a more detailed picture with colored pencils of the birds. But my thing, like what you were talking about, going out in the field, your research, whatever you're going to write about, it begins with observation and noting something interesting, whether it's ever been noted before or never noted before, and then just writing that down, illustrating it, and then following up with that, continuing to observe that same behavior and going back and then creating a story out of that. That has been a real passion of mine recently, much to the detriment of my novel. But, it became a pandemic pastime.
But what you describe sounds a lot like what you do with people, observing them and developing stories. Is it that different? Is it an extension of the same?
I think my mother taught me the powers of observation. What she was doing when I was growing up was always making comments about people. Sometimes she'd say it to me in Chinese, and she said, that person, they say this, but it's fake. They're not really nice. They're fake nice, and they will take advantage of you later. And I used to get really angry that she was always finding something negative in people. Why couldn't she just say they were fine? But what I realized later is that she was right, and that what she was noticing in people was very astute. And like it or not, somehow she imbued in me the same quality of observation, not to find fault in people, but to look at human nature and look at what is seen as the exterior, the words that are expressed, but looking for behavior that might contradict that or create nuance to what you think you're seeing. Which is a quality that you need to have, this observation, which you need to have when looking at characters and developing real characters. At the same time, you have to always be compassionate to your characters, never superior. And I think that's how we are naturally in nature. We're just curious. We're on this level with these creatures and what's happening, whether you're looking at, ants or whales and sharks or fungus, that you are at a level of respect as you observe what this is, knowing that you are the person without the knowledge of what's going on. So yes, I do think that these observations in nature are similar to what I'm doing. And if anything, I believe that it sharpens simply that practice of observation, that you look out and you do not just say, that's a brown bird, that's a tree with green leaves, that's a flower that's purple. That you don't do it either with learning the species names, that you look at it in conjunction with the rest of the world and how it operates in that relationship, including the relationship that you have with what you're looking at, the living creature. So I find that it's good practice being out in nature, and it always refreshes me.
Excellent. Well, great that you could join us, Mark. And I just want to make sure Mark has had an esteemed career in his own field and received the Lowell Thomas Award, I think back in 2007, was it?
I have no idea about time and space.
That's okay.
I live one adventure at a time.
Well, that works for most of us. I have to say this is a remarkable time together. And I know there's one other question. We must not leave it out because I believe my wife answered it. Char, would you read it?
Yeah, I will. And actually, I probably had the same question that Nancy did. And it's talking about your artwork, Amy. And do you sketch when you're on expeditions? Have you started doing that?
Yeah, I do. Whenever I go anywhere, whether it's on safari or Easter Island or, when I was out looking for venomous snakes, I'm always sketching because that is the best way for me to remember. You look at something and you can take notes. Taking notes is good, helps your brain to recall. But if I draw something, it is especially helpful for recalling some quality. It is what nature journalists do when they sketch, is that you pick out something that's salient about the creature, the behavior, and you draw it, and it concretizes what that was, that moment. So I'm always doing these drawings. They're actually very sketchy. I mean, they necessarily have to be sketchy. I remember I was doing this in Texas recently when we went to look at bats coming out of a cave that, 20 million bats leaving the cave at dusk and coming back in the morning, and then sketching, it's very hard to sketch 20 million bats, but sketching the habitat around it, including the snakes that were waiting for certain bats to just collide and fall down so they could be eaten. So looking at, that whole ecosystem there by the bat cave and drawing that, and including a few people who are watching this event that's happening. It's kind of like a diary almost of my life to see, what I've noted. What I do afterwards, sometimes with my favorite subjects, the birds in my yard is I will take one. I will take photos, and I will choose one that I feel captures the personality of that bird. And I only draw pictures of birds that I see that I have this relationship with. And I do a much more detailed drawing using colored pencils. This was something I started doing about 4 years ago. I had given up, drawing as a possible career when I was young. And that's mentioned in the documentary. My art teacher said I had admirable skills, but I lacked imagination, which is necessary for a deeper creative level. Imagine, I'm just told that anything in the arts is out. No art, no writing, no music, whatever. And it did not encourage me to keep, drawing. So that didn't happen. I didn't start drawing again until about 4.5 years ago. Took me a while to learn how to do certain things. What the person who really was instructive to me was John Muir Laws, who is a naturalist, a conservationist, a teacher. He is a remarkable, generous person. And if you want to take free classes with him every Tuesday and Thursday, go to the Nature Journal Club Facebook page and you'll see announcements of what's there. He also puts on a conference called Wild Wonder, and I will actually be teaching one of those classes called Finding the Story. And it's finding the story in your own backyard. What is it that you would notice? What can you notice? What can become a story either in the moment or over time if you follow this for a period of time? And also if you're doing birds, how to set up your yard so that you have a situation where birds stay longer. How birds will grab a seed and then they take off. So how can you draw these birds? Well, there are particular ways you can do that. One is bird bath, one is suet, where they have to just keep, pecking away at this thing. There are a number of ways to do that, to draw birds to you, so that you can observe them better. So that has been a new love of mine, drawing these birds.
And you're very good, Amy. It's just amazing to see the quality of your sketches, really. I've started doing art classes on Zoom during the pandemic, and I'm finding I'm so critical of what I do that I just have to keep at it and at it, even though I look at it and I go, oh, it's so bad.
Well, you know what you should do, and this is my advice to myself, is that you go to a place like the Nature Journal Club and you post it, no matter how bad it is, because the whole point of it is what you noticed. It's not about how perfect it is. So in the beginning, I would see these drawings that I did and they would be awful, but I'd force myself to post it because I had to get over perfection syndrome. If I didn't get over it, I wouldn't draw.
Right.
I'd draw very little. Every time I had a drawing that didn't go the way I wanted, I would just give up. So I would do that. I would post things I thought were good. I post things that I thought were not good. But I thought that whatever I had noticed that was in the journal, I thought that was worthwhile. It was worthwhile to share with people.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's participating, also those watching as well. Mark, thank you for jumping in. What a delight. And I saw your comment earlier on Amy's Facebook page asking about if she's going to talk about her adventures and explorations, and she did indeed. And Kim, thank you.
She has more of
one of the
them.
most articulate writers I know and photographers who really has a heart of imagination that then gets expressed on the page or the picture. Ken, I think on this day, 25 years after that disaster that up on Everest. I want to say a personal thank you, not only for joining us today and contributing to today, but I know you've had a lifetime also of treating patients, both in your own practice, but also other places around the world. And even those that kind of fell in your lap on the upper reaches of Mount Everest, when that was probably the most uncomfortable place to do surgery in the world then and now. But thank you for all that you've done and your service to the Explorers Club as well. Thank you, Char, for making sure this happened, the logistics, the wizard. And most of all, Amy, thank you for joining us. This is exactly what I had envisioned when I first talked to you. Hopefully we can do these more often, and you're always welcome to come visit us in San Diego, Southern California, and maybe we can sign up for your, where's the John Muir trip?
Wild Wonder is the conference name on John Muir Law's page.
Okay, we'll have to check that out. So I've seen the documentary a couple times, and we have till May 17th to watch it for free, but you can still watch it in pay-per-view. But here's the thing. I think we most of all want to thank Jamie Redford for his contribution tonight. And he would insist that if nothing else, that at the end of this program, that all of us, if we have not already, resolve to be organ donors. Now, we hope we don't do that soon. I remember I once asked Captain Jim Lovell if he's an organ donor, and he was in his early 80s. And he told me, yes, as a matter of fact, and whoever gets my heart gets a heart that's gone to the moon. Now, we're not all Jim Lovells, but I love that spirit. So in appreciation and honor of Jamie Redford's life, become an organ donor, tell your friends, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This has been a delightful evening.